The small-town diner buzzed with the soft clinking of cutlery and the warm hum of conversation as David carefully wiped down a booth, his calloused hands moving with the patience of a man used to hard work. His daughter, Emma, sat in the corner coloring on a napkin, her little legs swinging beneath the chair. Life hadn't been easy since his wife's passing, but David found solace in simple routines, working shifts at the diner and construction sites while making sure Emma felt safe, loved, and cared for. As he placed a clean menu on the table, his eyes drifted toward a young woman sitting across from a sharply dressed man at the far side of the room. The woman, elegant yet tense, smiled politely as her date rambled loudly about his wealth, cars, and business ventures. The man leaned in close, arrogance dripping from every word, while she sat stiffly, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup like it was her only anchor. David had seen many customers pass through this diner, but something about her silent plea in her eyes made his chest tighten. She clearly wanted to escape. The man ignored her unease, chuckling at his own stories, his hand suddenly reaching across the table to grip her wrist as she tried to stand. David's instincts surged, he couldn't just watch. Wiping his hands on a towel, he walked over calmly, his steady voice cutting through the noise, "Is everything all right here?" The woman's eyes widened with relief, her lips parting as if to thank him without words. She quickly nodded, seizing the chance. David gently placed his hand at her back, guiding her toward the exit with quiet authority. The arrogant man muttered under his breath, glaring, but made no move to follow. The cool night air wrapped around them as the door swung shut, and the woman finally exhaled, her shoulders trembling with the release of fear she had been holding in. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but sincere, her breath visible in the crisp air. David offered a small, awkward smile, rubbing the back of his neck. "No one deserves to be treated that way," he replied simply, as if stepping in had been nothing more than instinct, not realizing the impact it had on her. For a moment, they stood in silence under the glow of the street lamp, the hum of passing cars filling the gap. Then, almost shyly, she smiled at him, genuine, warm, and filled with gratitude. David thought nothing more of it, to him, she was just a stranger he had helped. But to Lily, the woman he had unknowingly rescued, this moment would linger far beyond the night. He had no idea who she truly was, or the fortune she carried in her name. And she had no idea yet that the poor dad who walked her out of a bad date was about to change her life forever. The morning after the bad date, David's mind was far from the stranger he had helped, his world revolved around making sure Emma got to school on time, had a packed lunch, and remembered her little hair clips that always seemed to vanish. He walked her to the school gates, kissed her cheek, and headed to his second job at the diner, where long hours meant sore feet but enough tips to cover the rent. As the day rolled on, he buried himself in wiping counters and refilling coffee cups, unaware that the woman from last night had thought of little else since he'd walked her out into the night. Lily, though born into immense privilege, had never known what it felt like to be truly seen as a person, not as an inheritance or a trophy. The memory of David's protective gesture, his calm strength, and the way he hadn't asked her name or number but simply ensured she was safe had replayed in her mind all night. Curiosity tugged at her until, against her usual instincts, she found herself walking into the diner that afternoon. She wore simple clothes, wanting to blend in, though her elegance was impossible to hide. David nearly dropped the glass he was carrying when he saw her take a seat at the counter, offering a smile that carried more warmth than he expected. "You again," he said, half teasing, half surprised. "I owe you a coffee," Lily replied, her eyes sparkling as if this had been her excuse all along. Before David could say more, Emma came running from the back booth, waving her crayon-stained fingers in the air. "Daddy, look," she cried, holding up a drawing of two stick figures with capes. Lily leaned down, studying it with genuine delight. "Superheroes?" she asked. Emma nodded proudly, pointing at the taller figure. "That's me and Daddy. We save people." The words made Lily's heart squeeze in a way she hadn't expected, and when she glanced up, she saw David's quiet embarrassment at his daughter's innocent praise. They talked easily after that, Lily asking questions about Emma's favorite colors, games, and stories while David watched in quiet amazement at how natural she was with his little girl. Hours slipped by unnoticed, laughter filling the diner booth where Lily sat with them as if she had belonged there all along. To David, it was unusual. This polished woman seemed far too kind, far too interested in their modest lives. He didn't know her last name or her world, and he didn't think to ask. All he saw was a woman who made Emma laugh and who looked at him without pity or judgment. To Lily, it was extraordinary. Here was a man who didn't know she could buy the diner 10 times over, who didn't see her as a bank account but as someone worth protecting. By the time the sun dipped low and the streets turned golden, both of them felt something quietly shift, though neither dared to name it. For David, it was the first time in years he didn't feel entirely alone. For Lily, it was the first time in years she felt free. Over the next few weeks, Lily found herself drifting back to the diner more often than she cared to admit, sometimes under the excuse of grabbing a coffee, other times with small gifts for Emma. New crayons, a fairy tale book, a scarf she claimed she just happened to have. David always protested, insisting she didn't need to spend money, but she would wave him off with a smile, finding joy in the simple act of being part of their little world. Emma adored her, climbing into her lap without hesitation, while David remained cautious, watching with the guarded eyes of a man who had been let down too many times before. Despite his walls, he couldn't deny the warmth Lily brought into their lives, the way Emma's laughter grew louder, the way he himself began to look forward to her visits. Then one evening, Lily invited them to the community fair, her excitement as childlike as Emma's. David hesitated but eventually agreed, unable to deny his daughter the joy of a night out. The fairground was alive with the glow of lights and the sweet scent of cotton candy, and Emma squealed as she rode the carousel, waving at them each time she passed. David and Lily walked side by side, talking easily, their laughter blending with the music that floated through the air. For a moment, David forgot his worries, forgot the bills, the loneliness, and the heavy weight of responsibility. But the fragile peace shattered when a man in a sharp suit approached, his tone brisk and reverent as he greeted Lily with, "Miss Harrington, I didn't expect to see you here." David froze, the name ringing in his ears, Harrington, the powerful family whose name was etched on skyscrapers, whose empire dominated the news. He looked at Lily, stunned, piecing together the truth he had never thought to question. She wasn't just a kind stranger who liked coffee and fairs, she was a billionaire heiress. His chest tightened, shame and anger mixing in a storm of emotions. He felt foolish, like a charity project she had entertained for fun. Sensing his shift, Lily quickly dismissed the man and turned back to David, her voice soft with urgency. "David, please, let me explain," she pleaded, her eyes wide with fear of losing something precious. But David stepped back, his expression hard. "Explain what? That you're from a world I don't belong to? That Emma and I are just a distraction from your life of boardrooms and mansions?" His words were harsher than he intended, but the sting of pride burned too deep. Lily shook her head desperately. "No, it's not like that. I came back because of you, because of Emma, not because of—" But David had already turned away, scooping Emma into his arms as she came running toward them, blissfully unaware of the tension. "It's late," he muttered, avoiding Lily's gaze as he walked her home in silence, the very gesture that had once connected them now carrying a finality that broke both their hearts. For days after the fair, David kept his distance, burying himself in work and pouring his energy into Emma, though he couldn't silence the ache Lily had left behind. He told himself it was for the best. That women like her didn't belong in his world, that Emma didn't need someone who would eventually leave. Yet at night, when his daughter had fallen asleep, he would find himself replaying Lily's smile, the way she had knelt on the diner floor to color with Emma, the way her laughter had filled the cracks in his weary heart. Meanwhile, Lily sat in her penthouse, surrounded by luxuries that felt emptier than ever, her thoughts consumed not by board meetings or stock prices but by a poor dad and his little girl who had shown her a kind of love no money could buy. Finally, unable to bear the silence, Lily went back to the diner, not dressed in designer clothes or jewelry but in a simple sweater and jeans, her hair tied back. She found David clearing tables, his movements stiff when he saw her, but before he could retreat, Emma came bounding out from the kitchen, squealing her name with joy. Lily scooped her up, holding her close, and for a moment, David's resolve wavered at the sight of his daughter's happiness. "Why are you here, Lily?" he asked quietly, his voice laced with exhaustion and guarded hope. She met his eyes, her own glistening with tears. "Because I don't care about the Harrington name, or the money, or any of it. I care about you, David. I care about Emma. You walked me out of a bad date without knowing who I was, without asking for anything in return. You saw me as a woman, not a billionaire. And for the first time in my life, I felt real." His chest tightened, the sincerity in her voice breaking down the walls he had so carefully built. "But I can't give you the life you're used to," he whispered. Lily stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. "I don't want that life. I want this one. I want the little apartment filled with laughter, the messy crayon drawings, the late nights with someone who would rather work himself to exhaustion than give up on the people he loves. That's wealth to me." Emma tugged on David's sleeve then, her innocent voice cutting through the heaviness. "Daddy, I like her. Can she stay?" The simplicity of her request made David's throat tighten, his eyes softening as he looked at the woman who had somehow become part of their family without even trying. Slowly, he nodded, pulling both Lily and Emma into his arms. And in that moment, the labels of poor and rich, billionaire and single dad, fell away, leaving only the undeniable truth of love that asked for nothing but honesty. From then on, Lily no longer came to the diner as a billionaire hiding in plain sight, she came as someone who had found where she truly belonged, in the arms of a man who had once thought he had nothing to offer, and a little girl who gave her the only title she ever wanted, family.